Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Canadian Shield, your source for trusted analysis. My name's Sterling. I'm your host. The federal government commissioned a poll, and their findings were released quietly a little while ago. And I believe they were released quietly because they don't want anyone to know what the results found, even if they are tentative. Now, we're hearing from every free government on earth that we all of a sudden are supposed to start censoring the internet. And when you start hearing about every politician saying the same thing from across the earth, like Canada, but also Australia, but the United States, I mean, same with Britain, France, I mean, every single solitary country on earth that's supposed to be a free country is trying to say, their far left governments are trying to say that you're not allowed to say whatever you want. You're not allowed to criticize people. And I think that that's just censorship. And the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression has to take paramount, because without that, we are all going to be stuck in some sort of dictatorship in one form or another. They'll be knocking on the door and dragging you away to re-education camps like Catherine McKenna wanted. However, before I get into it, I would encourage you all to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this channel with all of your socials. When you hit the like button, when you share, when you make a comment, you convince the algorithm that other people should be watching this, people that I might not necessarily default into their feed. More importantly, though, you tell the federal government, you show the federal government that things that I talk about are something that they shouldn't be trying to turn down in the algorithm, which I absolutely come up against every single solitary time I put up a video. Any assistance that you want to give me, I appreciate. As I was mentioning, the report was released and the government didn't mention it and the mainstream media didn't pick up on it. I suspect primarily because they weren't happy with what the findings were on misinformation. The spread of misinformation, a multivariate analysis of the relationship between individual characteristics and fact-checking behaviors of Canadians. It was undertaken by Howard Bilodeau and Aisha Khaled. Now, just to give you straight out of the gate, that title just says which kind of people do what with misinformation. And full disclosure, in my opinion, misinformation is nothing more than gossip. Full disclosure, I believe that humans probably started to gossip the second that they learned how to communicate with one another. They may very well have learned how to communicate simply for gossip. And I believe that the entire misinformation is a smokescreen to censor people that the government doesn't want talking about. They don't want people pointing out the truth. And remember, the freedom of speech is the right to speak the truth to people in power. Okay, in the abstract, in 2023, over 2 in 5 Canadians thought it was becoming harder to distinguish between true and false news or information compared with 3 years prior. This follows the finding that in 2022, almost 3/4 of Canadians reported having seen content online that they suspected to be false or inaccurate in the last 12 months. In this paper, multivariate analysis were conducted to examine the role of demographic and socioeconomic characteristics in the likelihood of fact-checking news or information and sharing unverified online information, behaviors thought to be associated with the spread of misinformation. Remember that they were looking for who spreads what and who says what. Age and education level emerge as factors that are likely to be important in the spread of misinformation, the report goes on. Increasing age was associated with a lower probability of fact-checking information. It was also associated with a lower probability of sharing unverified information online. Now, this is the part that's going to bother them. This is why they didn't do anything about it, this next line. Conversely, higher education was associated with a higher likelihood of doing both, of sharing it online and not fact-checking it. Because people of the Gen X understand that sometimes what you see and hear around you is not believable. Anyway, getting back to the report, they say it turns out that if you have more education, you are more likely to share it and not fact-check it. And that's something that's going to bother this room full of lawyers and educated individuals, because it turns out that it's not the beer drinker that shares the information. It's the wine drinker. It's the individual who thinks that they are so much smarter than the rest of us that they are going to share this information because they know it to be true, or they know it to be false, or they know that it's, going to get their friends, which is what I believe. It's just going to get their friends, in the gossip. It's just simply gossip. And yeah, I get that people believe gossip, but it's not the government's place to tell us that we're not allowed to hear it. It's the government's place to say, listen, that's not true, so let's move on. Now you want to tell me, well, it's swaying elections. Well, we got 11 people in the Canadian Parliament who are all taking money from foreign governments. At this point, you got to ask yourself, what does it even mean, an election? If governments can simply fly in and buy off our politicians. The results of the paper demonstrate the complexity surrounding the decision to fact-check information, because the surveys used in this analysis did not directly assess the ability of respondents to identify misinformation. Further research is required to determine how fact-checking behaviors relate to the spread of misinformation. The two researchers that conducted this poll took some of their information from two surveys that had been done by Statistics Canada. One of them is called Canada's Survey Series on People and Their Communities, which is referred to as SSPC, and the other one being Canada's Internet Use Survey, which is CIUS. How they apply to this document is what I found most interesting. I'm going to read you the paragraph where it kind of exposes the bias in this entire document. Foreign states and ideologically motivated individuals and groups, like the Liberal Party, Stephen Guilbeault, just to name a couple, are increasingly leveraging new and evolving technologies like artificial intelligence and social media algorithms to spread misinformation. And you'll see the little 2 that's there at the end of misinformation, and I'll highlight it here for you, right there, that little 2. So we say, oh, what is that all about? Well, we come down here and it says, see the government of Canada's webpage on learning about disinformation. So they literally say AI and social media algorithms, while the Canadian government uses algorithms to turn people down in the feeds, and they just invested $1 billion in AI. And they got this information and this entire line from a document that was paid for by the Liberal NDP government. The next one, misinformation can make it difficult for individuals to make informed decisions in areas such as health, finances, politics, and can pose a threat to democracy. And you'll see here there's a little 3 out there that I'll highlight for you. There's that little 3 right there. And of course, if we come down to the 3, it's to see the government of Canada's campaign against online disinformation. So both of these lines are come directly from the federal government, who was already trying to push its. You can see why they didn't talk about the fact that what they discovered was that educated people spread this misinformation and non-educated people do not. You can see now why they didn't want to talk about it. Because it turns out that they were only trying to confirm a bias that the federal Liberals have been trying to push on down our throats. Now we will cut to the meat and the potatoes of this video. Now, they asked him a bunch of questions, and I want you to pay attention down here where it says notes. The trust question on the survey series of people and their communities used to scale from cannot be trusted at all to can be trusted completely, 1 to 5. Responses were classified as follows: 1 to 2, cannot be trusted; 3 was neutral; and 4 to 5, can be trusted, which is how you see me lay out many of the surveys that I put on this channel. Now, when you look at the first bar, you can see scientific experts or peer-reviewed journals. These had the most trust. Okay, so back to the numbers, right? Scientific experts or peer-reviewed journals, 68% of people said that they trusted. 22% said they were neither here nor there, and 11% said that they cannot be trusted. Now, there are certainly some aspects of them that can't be trusted, but this is why people like Jordan Peterson get believed, because he's an expert in his field, whether it be, psychology or whatever it may be. And that's something that the federal government can't handle. I mean, they should all just come out and say, well, we're lawyers, so believe us. But that's probably one of the, that's a bad example, right? Here's the one that's going to really hurt them, right? Close contacts is 56% and 36% and 8%. So people trust the people that they know more than they trust the federal government communications, which only comes in at 50%. And that number is right on the hummer at 50%, which makes me wonder why that 5% was knocked off. However, what is important about that is that if you take the other two numbers, 28 and 22, and you put them together, you also arrive at 50, which means half the people in this country do not trust the government for what they say. And that's really the number that you need to hear. That 50% of people don't even believe what Statistics Canada has to say, for example. Never mind, the press release that comes out of from the desk of the Prime Minister and all that kind of stuff. Territorial, provincial, municipal government communications, news or information sources, they all fell under 50%, which means that people distrust them more than they trust them. News organizations it's a joke. It's 37% of people trusted news organizations to not share misinformation. Remember that, right? Other internet sources, 19% all of a sudden don't trust it or trust it. And we're into, 46% said one way or the other. 35% were like, no way. And then social media posts by other people, just normal people. 64% of people cannot be trusted. 29% said that they don't, neutral, meaning they trust it or they don't trust it. And only 7% of people said, yeah, I trust it. So what misinformation are they fighting against? Exactly. Clearly, people do not trust the federal government's posts, and clearly they do not double check or any of that on the posts that are put up on social media. So where exactly is all of this concern about misinformation? Well, I think that the concern is that they cannot manipulate you with social media posts. They cannot manipulate you with press releases from the federal government. And as a result of that, they get nervous and they get worried. It's not about anything other than that. And the truth is that according to this study, that people with education are the ones that are spreading the misinformation. And people like me and you that are just, the 99%, we are not spreading the misinformation because like all common sense people, we look at it and we say, I don't believe that. And we move on. Or we say, do not show this again in our feed or whatever it may be. And I believe that the desire to control you, to try and use AI and all of that to manipulate you into believing that, we're all for the party like a true fascist organization is something that they're attempting to do while they convince you that it's all about something else, while they gaslight you into believing that it's all about saving the children. You want to save the children? Take their smartphone, give them a dumb phone where they can't get on the internet at all, and make sure that you put G-rated stuff on their laptop, and you'll be fine. Just like you would with the television, right? You got a satellite dish, you say, no, these channels are all locked out. They need a password to get into them. All these other channels, the kids can watch as they like. The internet can do the same thing. But that's not what they're after. I believe that that's the kind of thing that this study exposes. What they really want to do is make people like me not be able to say, hey, I don't agree with you. What they really want to do is try to swing your vote and make you think that you're going to go one way or the other way. They want to make you afraid of anybody who isn't them. Now, you can do with this information as you like, obviously. Personally, I don't believe in censorship in any way, shape, or form. I understand that some people shouldn't be exposed to certain information, and I understand that trigger warning and all of that stuff. I mean, that's not a new concept, right? When I was young, they would say viewer discretion is advised, which is just the old style terminology for don't be triggered by what you might see and hear. And if you're going to see something that, might make you scared or whatever that they were describing whatever they were saying discretion was about, right? Like it would be some scenes depict violence. Viewer discretion is advised. And it would flash right across the screen and it would do it, at the commercial, they would come back and they would say it again. The commercial, they would say it again. So I don't see why the internet has to be any different than that. I don't see why you have to tell me that I'm not allowed to say that I don't trust the federal government to do the right thing. Why is that a problem? Am I so influential that, do you think that 56% of my close contacts are going to believe me, or they're going to think for themselves? And when you try and say, when the federal government tries to say something against it, well, 50% of people don't believe them. And if they're the provincial government, 53% of people don't believe them. So the problem isn't the misinformation or the disinformation or any of that. The problem is the government is not, the people are not happy with the government. And the government thinks that they can change that if they scare you into believing that somehow the boogeyman is coming after you in the middle of your keystroke or whatever it may be. The monster under the bed, the monster in the closet. At no time should we give permission to our federal, provincial, or anyone to censor what we have to say. Think about it. I mean, if you're a man out there, you know you got to be careful what you say to your wife. And you know you probably shouldn't swear around your children. But otherwise, if you have an opinion on politics, you need the right to say it out loud whenever you want. You shouldn't be permitted to be censored. The government shouldn't be deciding that because you don't agree with their politics, somehow you've done something wrong. Think of all the people that we have sent to different countries to defend the freedom of speech. And you want to say to yourself, oh, let's give Justin Trudeau the right to decide what I have to say. Let's give Mark Carney and Stephen Guilbeault the right to decide what I have to say. Come on. Who would do that in their right mind? Certainly not me. Without free speech, there can be no freedom. All right, I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you all for listening. I will talk to you next time.